Have you ever noticed that some people seem to move through their later years with a kind of quiet ease, while others find each decade bringing new limitations they didn't expect? For years, we've been told that this is simply genetics, or luck, or the unavoidable consequence of growing older. But there is something this explanation misses. In communities around the world where people routinely live well into their 90s with clarity and strength, researchers have observed something surprising. It is not that these individuals have found some secret treatment or rare nutrient. It is that their entire way of living sends a consistent set of signals to their bodies, signals that shape how they age from the inside out. What we are only beginning to understand is that your body is listening to everything you do, and the conversation you have with it today is building the architecture of your future self. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The long view. Understanding the architecture of a well-lived life. There is a question that becomes more interesting with each passing year. What does it actually mean to age well? For much of modern history, this question has been answered with a focus on what can be avoided: disease, decline, dependency. But a different kind of inquiry has been quietly taking shape, one that looks not only at the length of a life, but at its coherence, its vitality, and the factors that allow some people to move through their later decades with remarkable clarity and strength. Across the world, there are places where people not only live longer, but live better. In certain regions of Okinawa, Sardinia, and Ikaria, individuals regularly reach their 90s and beyond, not in spite of their environment, but because of it. They are not outliers who beat the odds through medical intervention. They are part of populations where vitality in later life is a common outcome, not a rare exception. When researchers study these communities, they find patterns that have nothing to do with the latest health trends and everything to do with how life is structured day to day, year after year. What emerges from this observation is not a list of rules, but something more like a philosophy. It suggests that the way we age is not determined primarily by genetics or luck, but by the accumulated effect of countless small decisions and environmental factors that shape the body and mind over decades. The genes that appear most frequently in long-lived populations do not guarantee a long life. They appear to create a greater capacity for resilience, but only when the conditions are right. This distinction is important. It shifts the focus from what we are given at birth to what we do with what we are given, and how we shape the world around us to support the life we want to live. This essay is an exploration of those conditions. It is not a guide to beating aging, because aging is not an enemy to be defeated. It is a biological process that can be understood, respected, and worked with. The goal is not to stop the clock, but to ensure that when the clock has run its course, the years leading up to that point have been lived with as much clarity, mobility, and connection as possible. To do that, it helps to understand what is actually happening inside the body as the decades pass, and what can be done to support the systems that keep everything running smoothly. The architecture of time. Every living organism changes over time. In the human body, these changes occur at every level, from the way cells replicate to the way organs communicate with one another. One of the most useful ways to think about aging is to see it as a gradual shift in the body's ability to maintain balance in the face of stress. When you are young, the system is highly resilient. You can stay up late, recover quickly from exertion, and bounce back from illness with relative ease. Over time, that resilience diminishes. The body still works hard to maintain balance, but the margin for error becomes smaller. This is not a design flaw. It is the natural outcome of systems that have been running for decades. The question is not how to stop this process, but how to ensure that the systems themselves are as well maintained as possible so that the margin for error never becomes so narrow that a small stressor causes a major breakdown. This is where lifestyle factors become not just helpful, but essential. They are the maintenance work that keeps the architecture sound. One of the most significant changes that occurs with age is a gradual shift in how the body handles energy. The foods you eat are broken down into fuel, and that fuel is either used immediately or stored for later. The hormone insulin plays a central role in this process, acting as a gatekeeper that tells cells when to take in sugar from the bloodstream. Over time, cells can become less responsive to insulin's signal. This is not an all-or-nothing event, but a gradual drift. The body responds by producing more insulin to compensate, creating a cycle that can eventually lead to persistently high levels of both sugar and insulin in the blood. This matters for reasons that go far beyond the diagnosis of any particular condition. When insulin levels remain chronically elevated, the body is essentially being told to store energy rather than burn it. This shifts the entire metabolic environment toward accumulation. At the same time, high insulin is associated with increased inflammation, which is itself a driver of many age-related changes. The system becomes stuck in a mode that favors storage over repair. And over time, this takes a toll on everything from cardiovascular health to brain function. The encouraging part of this story is that the system is highly responsive to input. The same mechanisms that can drift toward imbalance can also be guided back toward balance through the right signals. The body is listening. It pays attention to what you eat, when you eat, how you move, and how you rest. Every meal, every walk, every night of sleep is a message to the system about what kind of environment it needs to adapt to. This is not a quick fix. It is a long conversation between you and your biology, and the tone of that conversation shapes the trajectory of your health over decades. The intelligence of movement. There is a tendency to think of exercise as something you do to burn calories or build muscle, as if the body were a machine and movement were simply a way to expend energy. But this misses something more fundamental. Movement is not just an output. It is an input. It is a signal that tells the body what to maintain and what to prioritize. When you walk, your muscles contract and relax, pumping blood back toward your heart and easing the workload on your circulatory system. When you lift something, even something light, the mechanical stress on your bones signals the cells responsible for bone density to keep that tissue strong. When you stretch or move through a full range of motion, you are telling your joints that they need to remain mobile and lubricated. The body operates on a use it or lose it principle. Tissues that are not regularly challenged are gradually broken down and reabsorbed. Because from the body's perspective, maintaining them is an expensive metabolic process that should only continue if they are actually needed. This is why movement patterns established in midlife and beyond are so consequential. The body is constantly remodeling itself based on the demands placed upon it. If you spend most of your day sitting, the body adapts to that sitting posture. Muscles shorten, certain movement patterns become ingrained, and the range of motion in the hips and spine gradually decreases. This is not a sudden event. It is a slow process of accommodation that happens over years, and it is so gradual that you may not notice it until one day you reach down to tie your shoe and realize that something has changed. The most effective way to counter this is not to launch into an intense exercise regimen, but to build more variety into the way you move throughout the day. The body is designed for diversity of movement. It expects to walk, to squat, to reach, to twist, to carry. When movement becomes repetitive and limited, only a small subset of muscles and joints are maintained, while others are allowed to atrophy. This is why activities that involve multiple planes of motion and a range of positions are so valuable. They send signals to the entire system, telling it to maintain capability across the board. There is also a deeper layer to this. Muscle tissue itself is metabolically active. It is one of the primary sites where the body stores glucose after a meal. The more muscle mass you have, and the more sensitive that muscle tissue is to insulin, the more effectively your body can manage blood sugar. This is not about building large muscles for aesthetic reasons. It is about maintaining a reservoir of metabolic capacity. When muscle tissue is healthy and responsive, it acts as a buffer, soaking up excess glucose and reducing the burden on the pancreas to produce ever more insulin. This is one of the reasons why strength training becomes more important with age, not less. The stimulus that maintains muscle mass is progressive overload. The muscles need to be challenged with a load that is slightly more than they are accustomed to. This does not mean lifting heavy weights in a gym. It can mean bodyweight exercises, resistance bands, or simply carrying groceries and gardening. What matters is that the muscles are regularly asked to do something that requires effort. That effort is the signal that tells the body, yes, this tissue is still needed. Please keep maintaining it. The rhythms of rest. If movement is the signal that tells the body what to maintain, rest is the time when that maintenance actually happens. This is a point that is often misunderstood. Sleep is not a passive state where the body simply powers down. It is an active, highly orchestrated process during which critical repair work is carried out. During deep sleep, the body releases growth hormone, which stimulates tissue repair and muscle growth. The brain clears out metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking hours. Memories are consolidated, and emotional experiences are processed. The immune system carries out surveillance and strengthens its response to potential threats. All of this happens beneath the surface of consciousness, and it happens on a schedule that is deeply tied to the natural rhythms of light and dark. The relationship between sleep and the aging process is bidirectional. Poor sleep accelerates many of the changes associated with aging, and the aging process itself can make it harder to sleep well. This is partly due to changes in the architecture of sleep itself. As people get older, they tend to spend less time in the deepest stages of sleep and more time in lighter stages. They may wake more easily during the night and have a harder time falling back asleep. This is normal, but it is also modifiable. The factors that influence sleep quality are largely the same factors that influence overall health. Light exposure is one of the most powerful regulators of the sleep-wake cycle. The body's internal clock, the circadian rhythm, is set primarily by exposure to light and darkness. Morning light, especially sunlight, sends a strong signal that it is time to be alert and active. Evening darkness signals that it is time to prepare for rest. In modern environments, this natural signal is often disrupted by artificial light, particularly the blue light emitted by screens. This light tricks the brain into thinking it is still daytime, suppressing the release of melatonin and delaying the onset of sleep. The practical implication is not that screens must be abandoned, but that the hours before bed can be treated differently. Dimming the lights, putting away devices, and engaging in calming activities sends a clear signal to the body that the day is ending. Over time, this routine becomes a powerful cue that helps the transition into sleep happen more smoothly. There is also the question of timing. The body is not equally ready for sleep at all hours. It operates on a rhythm that makes sleep most accessible during a specific window, typically corresponding to the hours of darkness. Staying up too late or sleeping in too long can disrupt this rhythm, making it harder to fall asleep the next night. Consistency is a powerful tool. Going to bed and waking at roughly the same time each day reinforces the natural cycle and makes sleep more efficient. The terrain of digestion. There is a landscape inside the body that is as complex and dynamic as any ecosystem on Earth. It is the community of microorganisms that live in the digestive tract, and it plays a role in health that extends far beyond the processing of food. These microbes help extract nutrients from what you eat, They produce compounds that influence inflammation, and they communicate directly with the brain through pathways that are still being mapped. The composition of this inner ecosystem is shaped by many factors, including how you were born, what you were fed as an infant, the medications you have taken, and the foods you eat as an adult. It is not fixed. It changes in response to diet, stress, and environment, and it has a direct influence on how you feel, both physically and mentally. One of the most significant discoveries in recent decades is the extent to which the gut and the brain are connected. This is not a vague metaphorical connection. It is a physical and chemical pathway. The vagus nerve runs directly from the brainstem to the abdomen, carrying signals in both directions. The microbes in the gut produce neurotransmitters, the same chemicals that brain cells use to communicate. They also produce compounds that influence the immune system, which in turn can affect brain function. This helps explain why digestive health and mood are so often linked. When the microbial community is balanced and diverse, it supports a calm immune system and stable mood. When it is disrupted, the effects can ripple outward. This is not to say that all anxiety or low mood originates in the gut, but it does mean that for some people, supporting digestive health is a meaningful way to support mental well-being. The factors that disrupt the microbial ecosystem are common in modern life. A diet low in fiber and high in processed foods starves the beneficial bacteria that thrive on plant material. Antibiotics, while sometimes necessary, can wipe out large portions of the microbial community, leaving room for less beneficial organisms to take over. Chronic stress also takes a toll, altering the environment of the gut in ways that favor certain microbes over others. Restoring balance is not about eliminating all potentially problematic organisms. It is about creating conditions that favor diversity and resilience. This means eating a wide variety of plant foods, which provide the fiber that beneficial bacteria need to thrive. It means being thoughtful about the use of antibiotics and other medications that can disrupt the ecosystem. And it means recognizing that the gut is not separate from the rest of the body. It is deeply integrated, and it responds to the same factors that influence overall health. The chemistry of food. Food is information. Every bite you take contains compounds that interact with your biology in specific ways. Some of these compounds activate repair pathways. Others provide the raw materials for hormones and neurotransmitters. Still others can trigger inflammatory responses if the body is sensitive to them. The cumulative effect of these interactions shapes the terrain of your health over time. One of the most useful ways to think about food is in terms of its effect on blood sugar and insulin. This is not about avoiding sugar entirely, but about understanding how different foods influence the body's metabolic environment. When you eat a meal high in refined carbohydrates, blood sugar rises quickly. The pancreas releases insulin to bring it back down. If this happens frequently, the cells that respond to insulin can become less sensitive, requiring more insulin to do the same job. This drift toward insulin resistance is one of the most common pathways to metabolic problems. The foods that minimize this effect are those that are digested more slowly. Vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and foods rich in protein and healthy fats all tend to produce a more gradual rise in blood sugar. They also tend to be more satisfying, which makes it easier to eat reasonable portions without feeling deprived. This is not about perfection. It is about the overall pattern. A diet that consistently emphasizes whole, minimally processed foods sends a different signal to the body than one built around refined grains and added sugars. There is also the question of food sensitivities. Some people react to certain foods in ways that are not immediate or dramatic, but still produce low-grade inflammation over time. Gluten is a common example. For someone with a sensitivity, consuming gluten can trigger an immune response that affects not only the digestive tract, but also other systems in the body. This can manifest as fatigue, brain fog, joint pain, or mood changes. Identifying these sensitivities requires paying attention. It means noticing how you feel after meals and being willing to experiment with removing certain foods for a period to see if symptoms improve. The same principle applies to dairy. Some people lack the enzymes needed to fully break down lactose. Others react to the proteins in dairy, particularly casein, which can sometimes be broken down into peptides that have opioid-like effects on the brain. This is not common, but it is real. For those who are sensitive, eliminating dairy can lead to noticeable improvements in mental clarity and mood. The goal is not to create a long list of forbidden foods. It is to understand that food is not neutral. It interacts with your biology in specific ways, and those interactions matter. The more you understand about your own responses, the more you can choose foods that support rather than undermine your well-being. The weight of environment. The body does not exist in a vacuum. It is constantly interacting with the environment, absorbing compounds from the air, water, food, and products that surround it. Some of these compounds are harmless. Others can interfere with normal biological processes in ways that are subtle but significant. One class of compounds that has received increasing attention is the group known as endocrine disruptors. These are chemicals that can interfere with the body's hormone systems. Many of them mimic natural hormones, binding to receptors and either blocking the real hormone or creating an exaggerated response. Because hormones regulate so many processes, from metabolism to reproduction to mood, even small disruptions can have downstream effects. These compounds are found in many everyday items. Some plastics contain chemicals that leach into food and water, especially when heated. Certain pesticides are designed to disrupt hormones in insects, and they can have similar effects in humans. Fragrances and personal care products often contain phthalates, which are also hormone disruptors. The cumulative exposure to these compounds is a feature of modern life, and its long-term effects are still being studied. The response to this information is not fear, but awareness. Small changes can reduce exposure without requiring a complete overhaul of your lifestyle. Storing food in glass instead of plastic, choosing fragrance-free personal care products, and opting for organic produce when possible all reduce the load on the body's detoxification systems. The liver and kidneys are remarkably good at processing and eliminating unwanted compounds, but they have limits. Reducing the burden gives them room to work. There is also the question of the body's own waste products. Every metabolic process generates byproducts that need to be neutralized and eliminated. This is a continuous, ongoing process. The body has multiple systems for handling this, but they require certain nutrients to function optimally. The same vegetables that support the gut also support the liver's detoxification pathways. Compounds in cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cabbage help the liver process and eliminate excess hormones and other compounds. This is one of the many ways that diet and environment intersect. The thread of connection. There is a dimension of health that is easy to overlook because it does not show up on any lab test. It is the quality of your relationships and the degree to which you feel connected to others. Study after study has found that people with strong social ties live longer, healthier lives than those who are isolated. This is not a small effect. It is comparable to the difference between smoking and not smoking. The mechanisms behind this are still being explored, but several pathways are clear. Connection buffers the stress response. When you are with people you trust, the body produces less cortisol and more oxytocin. Heart rate and blood pressure are lower. The immune system functions more effectively. Isolation, by contrast, is a stressor in itself. It activates the same pathways as physical threat, keeping the body in a state of low-grade alert that wears down systems over time. This is not about having a large number of friends. It is about the quality of a few meaningful connections. It is about feeling seen and understood, having people you can turn to, and being part of something larger than yourself. For many people, this comes from family. For others, it comes from community, from shared interests, from work, or from purpose. The form matters less than the presence. Purpose itself is a powerful force. People who feel that their lives have meaning, that they have something to contribute, tend to fare better as they age. This does not have to be grand. It can be caring for a grandchild, tending a garden, volunteering, or pursuing a creative project. What matters is that there is a reason to get up in the morning, a sense that your presence in the world makes a difference. This sense of purpose organizes behavior. It makes you more likely to take care of yourself, to stay engaged, to keep moving. The integration of time, looking across all of these factors. What emerges is not a checklist, but a pattern. The body is designed to respond to its environment. It is constantly listening, adapting, and remodeling itself based on the signals it receives. Those signals come from movement, from food, from rest, from connection, from the air you breathe and the thoughts you think. They are not separate. They are woven together into a continuous conversation between you and your biology. This is why isolated interventions rarely produce lasting change. You cannot out-exercise a poor diet. You cannot sleep your way out of chronic stress. You cannot supplement your way around a lifetime of disconnection. The body is a system, and systems respond to the overall pattern, not to individual inputs. The most powerful approach is not to focus on any one thing, but to create conditions that consistently send the right signals across multiple channels. This takes time. The body does not change overnight. It took decades to arrive at your current state, and it will take time to shift course. This is not a reason for discouragement. It is a reason for patience. Small changes, consistently applied, accumulate into something substantial. The body is remarkably good at healing when given the right conditions. It just needs time and consistency. The older you get, the more valuable this becomes. Every decade, the choices you make matter more. The margin for error narrows, but the capacity for improvement remains. The body continues to respond to the right signals. Muscles can still grow. Bone density can still be maintained. The brain can still form new connections. The system is designed to last, but it needs to be used. It needs to be challenged, nourished, rested, and connected. It needs the full range of signals that tell it to keep going. There is no secret to aging well. There is no single nutrient, no perfect exercise, no hidden knowledge that changes everything. What exists is something more ordinary and more profound. The cumulative effect of living in a way that respects the body's design. It is choosing whole foods over processed ones. It is moving your body in varied ways throughout the day. It is protecting your sleep and your relationships. It is paying attention to how you feel and adjusting accordingly. It is understanding that you are not separate from your environment, and that the world you create around yourself becomes the world your body lives in. This is the long view. It is not about achieving a particular outcome by a certain age. It is about creating the conditions for a life that remains coherent and vital for as long as possible. It is about understanding that every day is a signal, and that those signals, repeated thousands of times, become the architecture of your future. The work is never finished, but that is not a problem. It is simply the nature of being alive. The body continues to respond, continues to adapt, continues to offer the possibility of better. The question is not whether you can stop time. The question is whether you can live in a way that makes the time you have worth having, all the way through. If there is one idea worth carrying forward from this conversation, it is this. The body you will have 10 years from now is being built by the choices you make today, not as a collection of isolated decisions, but as a unified pattern of living that speaks directly to your biology. Every meal, every walk, every night of rest, every moment of genuine connection is a signal. And those signals, repeated thousands of times, become the architecture of your future. The work is never finished, but that is not a problem. It is simply the nature of being alive. The question is not whether you can stop time. The question is whether you can live in a way that makes the time you have worth having, all the way through. We would be honored to hear what this conversation brought up for you, what you are noticing, what you are questioning, what you are reconsidering. The comments here are a space for thoughtful reflection, and we read each one. If this library of wisdom supports your journey, we invite you to explore other recordings and to subscribe so you never miss a new edition. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.